Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I am here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write about models. Now, if you're watching this and you are a graduate student, we are going to be looking at an example from an undergraduate leadership course. The principle will remain the same, but you may see more explanation than you get from me normally. So just keep that in mind. We do talk about how to write about models in a number of other webinars. We'll show that in just a moment. So today we're going to be working with an example that comes from Leadership 211. And we're going to be talking about how to read an assignment and how to take the model and use that as a basis for a discussion. So this is coming from Leadership 211, which is a course, Theories and Practices in Effective Leadership. Now, those of you who are in our EDD program will know that there are different concentrations for organizational leadership, positive leadership, and etc. This is starting at the what will make things work well. And it's very good to understand the different theories and models that you can use. I've worked for a number of different people over the years, and they've had many different styles of leadership. And there's usually a method behind the madness, as they say. It might not be one that you would do yourself. It might not be one that you incline to personally or work well with, but usually people have a reason why they do the things they do. So in this assignment, the first thing I like to do is to look at the purpose statement, if there is one, to see what we're supposed to do. The purpose of this assignment is to assess your knowledge of a conflict resolution model. That is a helpful thing to know because this is saying, all right, you need to demonstrate that you understand this. Don't just use it. Tell us why it's appropriate. Tell us how it's being used, if that's part of it. And tell us, show that you have an understanding where you could use this in practice. Now, to make an analogy to how this is different from how you might be describing a model in a literature review chapter, if you're writing a dissertation or a thesis, when you introduce the model or theory that you are using as a framework in chapter 1, you usually say, okay, I will be using this because X reasons. And that's a short section. Chapter 2, the literature review, you say, I will be using this for this reasons, and let's talk about why this is appropriate, including what it was developed for, how it's being used in things like what I am doing or that suggest it would be helpful. And that's presenting a larger set of information. Now, in chapter 3, when you're describing specific things you're doing, like perhaps why you ask certain questions, you might refer back to that. But the largest discussion in that context is in chapter 2, where it's discussing it and things that are relevant to what you're doing. And chapter 3 is the applied, here's to practice what I'm changing. But this is something where you have some latitude in how you describe it. Okay, so there's a worksheet. Complete the worksheet and use the behavior, consequence, and feeling model to think of a conflict scenario where you are a leader. In the right column, you'll write a short narrative of the scenario. In the left column, you'll indicate how, as a leader, you might follow each step of the model, pretending you are part of the narrative. Specify how you would implement each of the 4 steps to address this conflict scenario, and then upload the worksheet. Okay, so again, not quite the same genre as if you were writing a thesis, but a way to show your knowledge and practice. All right, so I'm going to grab a copy of this template here. And I'm not going to do this exact assignment because that would be someone else's homework. What I am going to do is I'm going to talk about something that will illustrate these principles and show how you would format that discussion in practice. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen here in Word. All right, so we have much of the instructions here. And we have the steps and the scenario. So we'll plan a statement and the scenario description. All right, so we are going to work with a particular scenario that I would be very surprised if you ran into in practice. And so we are going to take a situation from cinema here. We're going to take a scenario where things are not working right. And specifically, our scenario is coming from the movie Independence Day, which, if you have never seen the movie, aliens attack. It's not great. So, at our situation here, our conflict resolution is uh, involving the decision of whether to use nuclear weapons or not. And there are lots of reasons why if you're being attacked by aliens, you might think this is a good idea. And also where you be like, ooh, we don't like nukes. They're messy. So in this case, we are supposed to write a scenario in a short narrative that describes this. And then we'll talk about how we would implement the steps here. All right. Now, if you're referring to a case study, you would include a citation there. In this case, who we would have listed here would be the producer as the author. So the producer of the movie Independence Day was none other than Dean Devlin, who is, like Roland Emmerich, who frequently works with, a very prolific creator here. So because he's the producer, he would be credited in the author field in your references and also here. That was a movie that came out in 1996. So Devlin, 1996. Now, if you are writing an original scenario, then you wouldn't have this. But I include this because often when you're doing a case study analysis, you're using something that comes from a book. So author, date. So what's going on in this scenario? The US president has decided that the best counterattack is to use nuclear weapons. Now, there are different ways where you might refer when discussing cinema to the actors or to the characters. I don't think most people remember what the character is named, but they remember that, oh, that's a person played by Jeff Goldblum. Okay. And it's clear enough for us to identify who is being referred to, but for consistency, it would be a good idea to, if we're identifying by actors here, to state the name of the character played by the US president. Now, that happens to be played by um, Bill Pullman. So, for parallel phrasing here. All right. So, we have a scenario. What's the conflict? Goldblum's character has special knowledge needed to fight the aliens and is greatly opposed to the use of nuclear weapons. Okay, we have a basic scenario. And now, who is going to have the ownership? So when we're discussing this, we want to cite a model. And when you're introducing it for the first time, we want to use the full name and then introduce the abbreviation. Okay, according to the BCF conflict resolution model, the problem is owned by, and then you include the different information. But we also need to state how we know about this model, because some people are referring to the original journal article or book or something else that described it, but usually it's a secondary thing where you're looking at a different version of it that was produced by the authors or something else or someone writing about it. So there's going to be a citation, and we're saying that this is the specific version of the model that we're referring to, the one described by that author or set of authors and that publication year. Now, when we get to this next one, we have this statement and the conflict. We're still going to be referring to things in this fashion, but when it comes to that, well, okay, let's take a moment. If you're familiar with this video, go ahead and if you're familiar with this model, go ahead and brainstorm what's going on. For the benefit of the people who are watching this recording, we're going to pause and then continue after we've had a moment to brainstorm. Okay, and we're going to add some more information here. The president believes that he has a moral duty to act and use nuclear weapons. And the environmentalist, we want to be consistent about whether we're referring to roles or actors. And so we have these behaviors. Okay, that's part one. What's the consequence? So, but it's not just consequences. Some use nuclear weapons to prevent more humans from being killed. And so neither is willing to budge, which is very different from they have a pleasant disagreement, say, that's fine. You have your opinion, I have another. Now, when we're looking at these other steps, so for the specific assignment, you would go ahead and write things out in the format discussed in the reading here. That would be things like writing out dialogue for some people. And some people will go to the solutions. And because we're using our scenario from a movie, what if we tried a conventional weapons attack first? Well, if you've seen the movie, you know why that doesn't work out. But in this case, after nukes don't work the first time, they try something else. So you might have, what if we hacked the alien ship first? So you have a number of different things that you could put in here. And our goal here is to present a situation. If you're talking about the film, in our scenario, now you don't want to use our. That's called the globalizing language. So global we, global our. In this scenario, comma, from the movie Independence Day. And so this is really identifying the movie here. So with our developing sentence, we can take this information and move that to identify the movie here. What this does, it says, oh, any other information here is coming from the movie, so we don't have to have every sentence ending in a citation there. All right. So in terms of presenting the statement here, you might, when you're writing this, have something like, the president's behavior as classified under the BCF conflict resolution model includes, and then have a description there. Now, what this is doing is it's saying, all right, the BCF conflict resolution model, here's where that information comes. But the rest of the sentence is including your analysis, your observations, your assessment. And so this is how you can refer to the model in the sentence, but make it clear that this citation is telling that's for identifying that specific thing I am referring to. Okay. And that, in principle, is how we'd be talking about models in any other document. You want to refer to the specific version that you are using an author date citation. If there's a case study that you're applying to, you will want to discuss and introduce the case study first. If you're writing this in the context of a dissertation, you'd be discussing, the study context and activities and things like that. And that's about it. So I promised a concise video for this webinar here. And so let me conclude by saying, if you are working on these papers, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu with any quick questions. If you have something longer, you'd like feedback on your draft, feel free to schedule an appointment. You'll go to my.acu.edu and go to the online dropdowns and select the Online Writing Center from the list of resources as our quick links, and then just follow the instructions to schedule an appointment. You can also grab a copy of our course paper template or other materials by going to the Online Writing Center website. And with that, I bid you good night.